if I am trying to figure something out when I'm anxious? Well, our insight isn't there. That's why we tell people, if you're really angry with your coworker, don't send that email right then. Write it out, read it again tomorrow, change what you need to tomorrow when you have more insight. And so I think we try to solve the world when we're feeling super anxious, and that's only gonna keep us spinning. We have to wait till our insight comes back, then we can think more clearly. We start to believe what we tell ourselves, right? And so if we keep telling ourselves, I'm dumb, I'm dumb, I'm done, we truly are going to start to believe that. That's why they say it's so detrimental to tell a little kid you're not smart, because they're gonna start believing they're not smart and they're gonna stop trying in school. But our adult brains do that too, to an extent. And the approach in that is more of a cognitive behavioral approach. So cognitive reframing. When we recognize a distorted thought, that's where the if you can name it, you can tame it really comes in. That's a distorted thought. Let me reframe that with something that's more realistic, right? And people will often say, yeah, but I don't believe the reframe. Okay, well, you are believing this other thought because of what? Because you've told yourself that for so long. What do you think is going to happen if you start telling yourself the reframed thought? Okay, well, I could start to believe that.
Trigger warning. This episode does discuss subjects surrounding OCD and self-harm.
Wow, very nice. Solid smoothie.
Yeah, so I'm only like a savory smoothie kind of person. I don't like the fruity, which I know banana's a fruit,
Nah,
but
yeah. Do you like slice the bananas up and put them in the freezer?
sometimes I do that.
Okay.
I was like I'm a very on the go person. Like I get ready in 15 minutes and then I'm out the door. And so we haven't started, have we?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
great. I love this.
Yeah,
Oh, this is
we're
so
in.
fun. Is this how we start?
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
I love that so much. Yeah. So I put a whole banana in. I have one of those ninjas. So you can literally
nice.
like throw whatever in there and it turns into juice, which is really nice.
Yeah, I like to take the bananas, like when they start to get really brown, and then I put them in a Ziploc bag and freeze them. That way, whenever you put it in the blender, it makes the texture a little better.
I threw ice in there, which frozen banana would have been way better. I also just got my husband a Ninja Creamy.
I've heard of those.
I've
How
heard of
is
those
it?
too.
Game changer.
Really?
Like you can literally put anything in it and it turns it into ice cream.
Ugh.
I mean, it probably doesn't always taste good depending on what you put in it, but
Sure.
the consistency is ice cream every time.
Really?
It's
what
wild.
what I've been doing for the past few years is just use less milk, and that works pretty good.
Yeah, that's
maybe
fair.
this creamy thing will be a game changer.
It's a game changer. It was worth it for sure. But I
try
don't like, you have to freeze it overnight and then you make it the
No,
next day. So
game
that's
over.
not a very not a very Americanized way of doing
I mean,
things.
who makes ice cream to have it tomorrow?
I know.
Yeah.
It does take some
Way-
willpower.
way
I always
too
have
much
an extra
delayed
pint on the go
gratification.
though. Like so when I'm
there you
making
go.
that one, I'm eating a different one.
Yeah. So it's
okay.
only that first. It's like anytime you start a new. I always tell people when you start a new habit, it's that first time,
Yep.
or especially with sleep, right? Like the first time, if you want to get up early, you have to either force yourself to bed early and you won't be tired, or you just have to wake up early and fight through it. It's kind of the same thing as that first time you have to make it and then force yourself to not eat it until 24 hours later.
That's exactly what like the willpower it takes. But I always like to have the what is it, Jenny's ice cream on the side. Definitely very different than what I put in my creamy. They've got something going for them.
Jenny's.
Jenny's
I
are
feel like I've heard
underground
of it, but
creamery.
okay.
But that's a Houston thing. You like will I am an ice cream fanatic.
I was about to say, we're getting put
we
on
could
to the
make
ice
this
cream.
whole episode about ice cream if you want, but I don't feel like that's where we want to go.
How ice cream relieves anxiety is what we're gonna
Forget therapists.
Is what we can focus
No,
on
just
today.
kidding, just kidding.
All right. Well, Sean, I know your breakfast won't be as interesting as Callie's here, but what did you have?
Man, really, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was just coffee, and that was it. Yeah, we definitely.
Just straight fasting today.
Yeah, fasting today. Yeah.
All day?
No,
Okay,
I'm
good.
joking. I do not
okay.
fast. No, I'm gonna go and get something to eat right after this. It was just the way the morning went for me.
morning,
So yeah, just coffee.
I had 3 fried eggs on 2 pieces of toast.
Yum.
And what I like to do, I like to mix it up. I go sweet some days and savory other days, so I'll do a little bit of jelly on the toast.
Oh, nice. With
Or-
the eggs?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And today was a savory day. So I do is I take my toast and I spray it lightly with cooking spray. And then I put everything but the bagel seasoning.
Oh, I have that.
So it sticks to it. So instead of
smart.
using butter, I use a cooking spray
I love it.
and then put the eggs on it. And yeah,
Yum. Yeah, my
Sounds so
husband,
very good.
every day without fail, he has 5 eggs
5.
for breakfast with a big bowl of oatmeal.
Wow, I like this guy.
Very
I feel
regimented.
like he
sounds
was
jacked.
Yeah, I was about to say he sounds pretty yoked.
He would like to think so, but no.
Yeah?
Not, I mean, he is a Houston firefighter,
Okay.
but he actually got into distance running because
Oh.
of my running career.
Okay.
So he did his first ultra like a month ago.
Wow.
50 miler. Yeah.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's harder. He always says like, well, I'm the better runner now because I did a 50 miler. And I'm like, that's not how it works. But whatever you want to say.
My wife just did her first marathon a few weeks
Amazing.
ago.
Which one did she do?
A Sugarland.
Oh, that's a good one.
So maybe the way we can segue into some anxiety of stuff a little bit, and I have lots of questions for you and y'all's podcast and exactly what you do and how it started and everything. But and I also wanted to do. You guys do the anxious moment.
We do an anxious
I
moment.
kind of wanted to do that real quick, maybe.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to hear yours, on our
walk
show
us
here.
through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, every episode on the Anxiety Society, we start with an anxious moment. And it's just something that's happened over the past week that gave you a little bit of anxiety. And so I can go first to give you guys some time to think. I was on my way into the office today, and on Fridays we can wear jeans, but like every other day we're kind of, a little bit more professionalized, I guess. And I had this like, oh no, it's Thursday moment, but I was already like almost into the office.
With your jeans on?
With my jeans on. Because I had this like, oh no, it's Thursday. I messed up my days, but it was definitely Friday. So I had that like jolt of anxiety of, ooh, I'm breaking a rule. But then I realized pretty early that it was in fact Friday and everything was okay.
Ah, it's kind of settled down.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, mine, just yesterday, I'm kind of curious. I'd like to ask your advice on how you'd handle this as well.
Please.
And I guess actually beforehand, can you just go ahead and tell us, I guess exactly who you are, what you do, your role real quick,
Absolutely.
and then I'll share.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I am Callie Werner. I'm an anxiety clinician in Houston, Texas. I work at the OCD Institute of Texas, and I also have a private practice called Athlete Rising. And so in private practice, I work primarily with athletes that have OCD, perfectionism, pre-performance anxiety, and we do lots of great stuff.
Wow, I did not know that. I would love to ask you some details about gym anxiety. It sounds like you're the perfect person.
Sure. Does your anxious moment have to do with gym anxiety?
A look, kind of. There was anxiety, and it was in a gym. This gym has no equipment yet. It is our new location.
Oh, yeah. I'll count that as gym anxiety.
Yeah. So it is a different form of gym anxiety. So we were over there yesterday, and we're about a month behind what we were expected to be. So I'm already kind of like worried about it. Because the construction, a lot of permits. I don't know if you're familiar.
To some degree,
Okay,
yeah.
So it's like a lot the inspections and stuff from the city. So it's already a little behind, but we got all of our most of our inspections all done on Tuesday.
Okay.
So our floor is scheduled to be installed yesterday. The floor has been sitting over there inside, wrapped up in saran wrap and a tarp, so it doesn't get dirty for like over a month.
Oh man.
And so I finally I called the floor guy, hey guys, we're ready. Let's get this floor in here. They show up, nicest guys. Let me just say, very nice.
Yeah.
But as I'm explaining to them how I want the layout, because we have just like we have here. I don't know if you pay attention, but we have rubber floors, and then there's turf. There's turf right in the middle, and there's a rubber floor on each side.
Yeah.
Right. And so these rubber floors, they come in 100-foot rolls.
Okay.
And you have to unroll them, you have to cut them, and you have to lay it out, and it has to fit perfectly.
It's a whole process.
It's a long process. It's very difficult. It's very demanding. It's very physical. They weigh 400 pounds each roll.
Wow.
And there's 10 of the rolls. And so as I'm telling them how I want the rolls laid out and the turf, and so the turf comes, it's 30 feet wide. And sorry, this is getting long, but I want you to have the details.
No, I'm following. I'm following.
The turf is 30 feet wide, but we want and it's 35 feet long.
Okay.
We want a 70-foot piece.
Right.
So 7.5 feet
Stacking
wide,
it.
right? Yeah, stacking it.
Okay.
That was pretty easy, right?
Yeah, followed.
Okay. So I tell the guy this, and he's like, okay. 30 minutes later, as he's like laying the floor, starting to move the floors around, so he's like, hey, what are you going to do with the other half of the turf that you're not using? And in my mind, I'm just like, who
didn't follow.
You didn't listen to anything I said. Nothing that I said, like, obviously implanted into your mind. And then, so that happened. And then when they start to cut it, they realize that the knives that they brought like aren't working.
Ooh.
And then I don't know if you know what a chalk line is, but it's basically a tool that helps you draw a straight line. It was broken.
Oh man.
What a coincidence.
You tried to wing it?
No.
Okay, that's
Thank God he did not try to wing it. But I'm just like in the back of my head, like I was only supposed to be there for an hour.
Right.
Line them out and then I was going to leave.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was just like, I'm going to have to be here all day.
Man.
And
so were you?
Yes.
Oh,
and it wasn't, but I didn't know how else to handle it. So I'm curious, like in that situation, because I had a lot of anxiety about like, and my only solution was I stay here and make sure this goes correct.
Yeah.
Like, are there other solutions? I mean, what do you think about that situation?
It totally depends on the situation, right? Like, are you somebody that tends to have more perfectionistic tendencies, where at the same time, this guy kind of already showed you that he didn't really fully understand what you were saying. And so I think it's about finding that mix, because I have some patients that, like someone will make a mistake and then they think, well, this person's going to mess up forever. And so I need to kind of like micromanage that situation. But then I have other patients that are like, they made a mistake and I'm just going to like follow up, catch in. And so I don't say, like, knowing what I know about that situation, I don't say that that was a wrong decision. I think the exposure there, right? Because in OCD anxiety world, we do a lot of exposure with response prevention. So it's exposing yourself to the fear instead of running away from the anxiety, which is what we all do in America when we're feeling anxious. We say, I can't handle this, and we pick up a phone and scroll. Or we, instead of waiting for our Amazon delivery at the proper time, we look for same-day delivery, right? Like we just can't sit with discomfort anymore because of technology and how the world is. It's almost like we can't handle any uncertainty. And so if there's areas of your life where you can build room for more uncertainty, I promise it gets easier. You just have to practice it first.
Sure. You have to like be exposed to it.
Right.
And I will say, like, I don't think I'm usually much of a perfectionist.
Okay, then for you,
to
it
be
was
honest.
probably a valid decision
Yeah.
that you made.
But in that case, this is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of money.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. These floors are very expensive.
Valid, but like inconvenient, right?
Yeah. So like, I don't know. It was tough.
Yeah.
But it ended up working fine. Once the planning part was done, it was
Right.
actually fine.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
you
like-
didn't really have to do much when you were
No.
there. It was just a matter of
No,
finding
the
it.
planning is what was like.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've worked with contractors before, but usually that is the
Say less.
once they get to the work, it's all fine, So, but Sean, did you have anything? Any anxious moments this week?
Yes, I have.
What was your anxious moment?
It was a big one. So for the past year, I have been dealing with some family health issues, and they kind of came to the head at the head of this week, and it was a lot of anxiety built around that person's health and how it was all going to pan out. And when it all really came to a head, the first thing I thought to do, you said running. I physically ran,
Yeah.
through a lot of it. I felt like, all the different emotions. You're sitting there in the room, and it's a lot going on in your head, just swirling around. And the first thing I could think of was like, I gotta run. I gotta run. So that's what helped kind of bring me down a little bit, is
Right.
really help me focus, and running was the help.
key
So you actually went for a run?
I actually went for a
Nice.
run.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
actually went
awesome.
for a run.
Yeah, maybe that's another thing that we can discuss here is a little bit about the benefits of exercise with anxiety. So Sean was feeling very anxious. He induced exercise, which obviously is something that we love, and it helped him overcome. Like, what's going on in that situation? Why does that help so
Yeah.
much? And how do we get more people to do that?
Right. So when we're feeling really anxious and there's not like a tiger in the room, is how I would make the analogy, our amygdala is misfiring, right? And so when we do things like exercise, we're releasing endorphins, we're releasing serotonin, which make the anxiety naturally feel better. I am another person, and I'll just kind of share a personal example that really loves exercise. I feel better when I do it. I competed in back up, like in the 2020 Olympic trials for the marathon. And at that point in time, my exercise was not in a good place because I relied only on that to help me regulate my anxious moments. And so when you think about like OCD, for example, what I primarily treat, individuals have an obsession and then it causes them anxiety, right? So for me, I had this idea that I can't tolerate anxiety unless I exercise, and then I could feel better temporarily. But then the next time I felt really anxious, well, let me just go run a mile around my block to regulate my anxiety. That's when I think we don't really talk as much about this end of exercise being unhelpful because it's your only coping skill. So I had to do a lot of my own work to learn to regulate my emotions in another way, and have more coping skills by knowing, like, I don't need to just get rid of my anxiety every time. I have to let it be there, and can I still function with it being there? And then that's what slowly made it subside. I just share that because yours was a very healthy example of using exercise to kind of get through some hard things. And I thought of, well, let me share an example when it was kind of in an unhealthy place, because it was the only coping skill that I relied on.
No,
So
I love that.
Yeah, that's not a healthy way to
Right.
handle
We
it.
all have to have more coping skills, because what about on the day when I'm at work and I have like a really tough patient that I'm seeing? I can't just like leave the office and go run 2 miles. I've got to learn to sit with that and cope with it in a different way, because I can't always have that one coping skill.
Well, let's talk. What would you do in that situation then?
Yeah, I think it's more about teaching your brain that your anxiety is not dangerous, right? So being able to say to myself, yeah, I can feel uncomfortable or I can feel anxious and I have more patients to get to. My value is not to replay how that session went over and over, kind of self-punishing myself. My value is to be present with this next patient that I have, to kind of meet the needs that they need me to help them with. And that involves me not ruminating, right? So like a lot of self-talk and trying to recognize that rumination, that's when we're replaying conversations. Like a common one that most people can think of is happening at some point in their life is, did I offend that person, right? And then they'll replay that conversation over and over. Well, by the time you've replayed that conversation 20 times, you've added all of this extra content that didn't even happen. And so we actually get further away from the truth. But what we think is happening when we replay a conversation is that we're getting closer to an answer. We're only actually making ourselves more anxious. So it's about saying, I'm not going to have a solution to this, and I can get on with my day anyways. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you have any specific tips for like how to get out of that spiral?
Yeah.
Like how do you stop that spiral in that moment?
I think for everybody, there's like a phrase that works best for them. One of the ones that worked best for me when I was really debilitated by my OCD in college, I got diagnosed and got to a point where I couldn't use a public restroom. I couldn't go take the garbage out. I couldn't do all of these things that I did on a day-to-day basis without thinking twice before my OCD got to that point. And I had to remind myself that the more I replay something, the more I try to figure something out that doesn't have a certainty answer, the more uncertain I become. So I like to tell myself, even now, although I don't really struggle with OCD at this point in my life, I've gotten treatment, and that's why I became an OCD provider myself. But even now, I find myself just ruminating, because that's what humans do, about things that are not helpful to ruminate about. And I'll remind myself of this statement: you get clarity when you stop trying to get clarity, right? So if I am trying to figure something out when I'm anxious, well, our insight isn't there. That's why we tell people, if you're really angry with your coworker, don't send that email right then, right? Write it out, read it again tomorrow, change what you need to tomorrow when you have more insight. And so I think we try to solve the world when we're feeling super anxious, and that's only going to keep us spinning. We have to wait till our insight comes back, then we can think more clearly.
Yeah, my wife has one that we use like in our household. It's, don't freak out before you find out.
Oh, I like that.
I like that too.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Denver's my wife. That's one that we use a lot. Don't freak out before you find out.
Yeah.
And what that helps me remember is like, just find out.
Right.
That is the trick.
Right.
To actually find out. Whatever, for me, my anxiety often comes, as an entrepreneur, in the small business world, a lot of your anxiety comes from because you don't know what's coming next.
Right.
So it's like this constant, and I'm not a professional by any means
but
controlling this, but that little saying can be
means wait,
helpful.
right?
Yeah, it means
Yeah,
wait. It means
yeah.
be patient. Let's find out.
Yeah.
Or it means act.
Right.
That's a big one. My personal anxiety, and maybe
Yeah.
you hear this all the time from your patients, comes from just like not acting on something. So you're lost in this spinning,
Right.
rumination, I guess is the word that you were
Yeah.
using, of, what's going to happen? What do? I can't do this. That's another one I want to discuss with you, is the imposter thing. That I can't do these, I can't do this thing starts to filter into your
Yeah.
mind. but you don't even know if you can or not because you haven't acted yet. Or
Right.
that's what happens to me.
It's like keeping you frozen.
Yes.
The anxiety is keeping you from even trying.
Yeah.
That makes
And
sense.
I deal with that quite often.
Yeah.
And it's like this constant thing.
Right.
But yeah, so let's talk about the imposter thing, I guess, while we're on that subject. Where I guess I remember I listened to your episode about that recently, and it was really interesting. So I just kind of wanted to hear your definition of imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Well, I think with imposter syndrome, comparison always is a big part of it, right? So that I would define it as when we think that our skills don't measure up to what we're doing. And when someone is struggling with comparison, we often forget that we're not comparing to the vast majority. We're comparing to that one person that's doing it a little bit better, and we get tunnel vision on it. And that's not helpful, right? Because that's what happens when we do that. We get stuck in our tracks because we think we don't measure up when really you might be pretty darn good at what you do. You just aren't allowing yourself to see that. And so I think even when it comes to imposter syndrome, there's a little bit of exposure therapy there because we're asking you to go and do it anyways, right? Even though you're afraid, even though you don't know if you'll measure up, can you give it a try? Can you see what happens instead of focusing on the worst case what if scenario? Because that's what our brains go to as default is what's the worst case scenario I can come up with, and I'm going to accept that that's going to happen, and so therefore I'm not going to do it. But instead, what if it doesn't happen? What if we can see a different outcome? You're not going to know until you try, and that kind of approach of getting yourself ready to do the exposure can be really helpful.
Yeah, that is, I'll share, I guess, on exposure therapy. When I was my mom died very young, when I was a teenager, and as you can imagine, very difficult.
Yeah.
But I did exposure therapy from my understanding, and I would go to therapy, and it would be just hour-long sessions of, I basically, when I was 15 years old, I watched my mom have a heart attack and die. I had to call 911, perform CPR, and do the whole thing. And as you can imagine, as a teenager, it was very difficult or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did about a year of therapy, and now I can talk about it. It doesn't bother me. There's no issues or anything in it, but it would just be hours and hours and hours of exposing yourself to the deepest details
Right.
of the event. So is that, am I on the right track with that?
So that's prolonged exposure therapy, I think is what it's called, specifically for trauma.
Okay.
And then the OCD exposure therapy, both have that core of, right, you're exposing yourself to something your brain wants to avoid. With trauma, it's so that you can process it. With OCD and anxiety, it's so that you can teach your brain that you can handle uncertainty. Because really, when it comes to anxiety, our brains kind of get to this place of whatever our anxiety latches onto, we can't handle uncertainty with that. So I like to use this example of, well, yeah, but when you're driving to the grocery store, let's say your anxiety doesn't latch onto that. There is a chance you could get in a car accident and not make it to the grocery store, right? But our brains don't fixate on that because that wouldn't be healthy. Instead, we think of, I need to get eggs, I need to get milk at the grocery store, and that is a healthy way we live in uncertainty. When anxiety is attacking, it picks something that you can't handle uncertainty with, like the presentation tomorrow, or if my hands are clean, if I need to feel this urge to wash them, right? And it says you can't handle not knowing if your hands aren't clean. You can't handle not knowing how the presentation's going to go. But truly you can. You get in your car and drive to the grocery store every day. We just have to practice tolerating that uncertainty again in the area that our anxiety's gotten off the train tracks with. We've got to get it back shifted on.
So prolonged exposure therapy is for trauma.
Right.
But short-term exposure therapy for day-to-day anxiety would be just doing the thing.
Yeah,
And then
exposure
you
with
prove to
response
yourself
prevention.
that you can.
Yeah, exposure with response prevention is what it's called for anxiety and OCD. And so that's when you engage in the exposure and you prevent the response. So for somebody that's a chronic hand washer because they feel like I'm going to get sick if I don't wash my hands 30 times a day. Well, we're going to have them slowly build up to touching certain things that they've been avoiding, cross-contaminating, but we're preventing the response of the hand wash, right? If they touch those things and do the exposure, they're not actually going to benefit because if they don't include the response prevention because they're just going to go wash their hands after.
I understand. So it's a two-part equation.
Kind of a two-part equation. Yep, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's how it works for anxiety specifically.
Okay, and you got into that because you were a victim yourself.
Yeah, I diagnosed at 21 when I was competing in college. I was trying to go to nationals in cross country and had all of these intrusive thoughts, things that were happening, and I thought I was losing my mind. I had no idea what the problem was or why I was dealing with what I was dealing with. And luckily finally got to an evidence-based clinician that I quite candidly saved my life. I think that now looking back, I had OCD as young as 3 years old. We can see all the symptoms that were manifesting, but it would wax and wane until the complete onset, right? Where like the switch just wouldn't turn off, and it progressively got worse when I turned 21. And that's when other people started noticing, because I could hide it really well when I was younger. But that's the interesting thing with OCD. The average length of time it takes for someone to get appropriate treatment from the onset of symptoms is 17 years. So, my symptoms onset very young, and then I didn't get treatment till 21. Changed my career trajectory because I wanted to be a news reporter, but because this quite literally saved my life, I realized I want to do something else that'll be more meaningful to me. So
Similar myself, after that incident, it took me a few years still, but I lost almost 100 pounds, and it changed my life, and that's why I do what I do here.
Yeah, that's, I think, like most of us in care fields, we do this for a deeper meaning reason, right? Like
100%.
we have some kind of way to relate, which is super cool.
Yeah, I have a question. You said I found an evidence-based clinician.
Yeah.
Are there non-evidence-based practices going on?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. There's evidence-based therapy for different diagnoses. Like for trauma, prolonged exposure is an evidence-based treatment modality. EMDR is evidence-based.
What is that?
Eye movement desensitization. Something I'm gonna butcher it, but yeah, it's about eye movement, and you kind of do some exposing yourself to certain thoughts while your eyes are moving back and forth with them closed. It's really a cool modality.
Okay.
There's a couple. EMDR and I'm forgetting, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So those are all really good evidence-based therapies for trauma, not good evidence-based therapies for OCD, right? And so when I was first really in the midst of some intense OCD, I went to just a general provider because that's what we know what to do, right? Like, let me go to the therapist and they'll help me. Talk therapy for OCD is not helpful because think about it, trying to get to a place where you can handle uncertainty. If I am asking a talk therapist, are my hands clean? They're just going to reassure me every time your hands are clean. Okay, great. Well, that becomes a compulsion. So I need that reassurance, and all I'm doing is adding gasoline to the fire with OCD. That's why exposure with response prevention is the gold standard of therapy for OCD. So really, evidence-based therapy is something that's been tested in research for specific diagnoses and is rooted in a lot of research for good outcomes.
Do you feel like non-evidence-based, do you feel like it's because of providers are doing it on purpose, or are people just not educated?
I think everyone has good intention for the most part. I do think that there's some providers that will say that they want a big caseload, right? And so it's hard for them to turn someone down if that's part of their salary, which is unfortunate. But we really should all have a specialty. So I think there's a good episode on our podcast, the difference between good therapy and bad therapy. And we talk and we go into some deep-rooted stuff on evidence-based therapy and non-evidence-based therapy and what to look for. And one of the things that I would say is a little bit of a red flag when you're looking for a therapist, if they say they treat 20 different diagnoses, that's a bit of a red flag. How can you specialize and treat 20 different things that all require different modalities?
What's the maximum you think someone can?
Well, I mean, it should kind of be all within the same area, right? So like OCD is an anxiety specific, there's a lot of anxiety tied to it, right? So at our clinic, for example, we treat OCD, specific phobias, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, because all of those use ERP, right? And so that's our wheelhouse. We don't treat eating disorders. We don't treat personality disorders. We will be referring out for someone that is dealing with something that requires a different treatment modality.
Okay, yeah, and I'm asking a lot about this because that's very common in our world.
Yeah.
Non-evidence-based, especially nutrition.
Yeah. Well, and you think about like social media now, right?
Yeah,
Like everyone is a dietitian in their own eyes, right? And so that information is free for everyone to grasp. And I always use this example. What really bothers me is there will be a post about, well, if you try this CBD gummy or if you blow into this anxiety whistle, you'll be cured. Of course, people would rather choose that over 12 to 18 therapy sessions, right? Like, and that's so detrimental because it's these false quick fixes that don't actually help.
Yeah, it's the same thing in exercise. They're like, try this, 4-week or 6-week, challenge thing or this special diet.
Or buy some like belly bands or something.
Yeah,
Yes,
those are the
Like,
worst.
yes.
The products are the
yeah.
worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about services, but
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
products are
Unbelievable.
Yeah, she brought
Yeah.
up the anxiety whistle and like CBD, so I instantly thought like products too. So yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
cool,
it is.
a dangerous trap.
It's very dangerous. And I get people to come in here sometime, and a lot of times they're looking in healthy ways, like they want to improve themselves. They want to be. I was just
Right.
discussing the other day with a lady. I heard you guys talking about the Mel Robbins podcast.
Oh, yeah.
on y'all's podcast, and my wife loves Mel Robbins.
Yeah,
and so
Mel Robbins is great.
one of our clients, she just got started with us a few weeks ago, was telling us about one of her books, which I have not started yet. My wife recently started. It's called Let Them. I don't know if are you
I'm
familiar with
familiar.
that?
I haven't read it, but I know
Okay.
the book.
I've heard
Yeah,
good
my
things
sister-in-law
about that
just
book.
read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've heard really good things
Denver's,
about that book.
Denver's reading it right now.
Ooh,
And
I'm about to add it to the
but
list.
basically, I was talking to her the other day, and she was telling about how she's been going to these. She's very healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. This person is in her mid 50s, maybe, very healthy, great outlook on life. Everything is good, but she's continuing to look for these this very specific functional medicine type doctor. And I was like, you know, we need, like, do you mind if we just like talk for a minute
Right.
about, hey, I don't think that this search for you may be the healthiest thing, because
Right.
what's important to remember in this case, especially in this functional medicine and health wellness world, it gets to a very dangerous territory when you're
Totally.
trying to reach the margins. You know, and you're like 98% of the
Oh,
way
yeah.
there. You exercise regularly, you eat really healthy, you have a positive outlook on life. You have everything that you need. You're probably causing yourself more stress.
And money,
Yeah,
finances.
and for
right?
sure.
You can spend unlimited amount of finances on that stuff.
Yeah, why do you have an opinion on why that happens to some people?
Yeah, we see it in our clinic a lot. It's amazing how much overlap I'm recognizing we have in our lives. But just like, you know, if someone, I'll give an example in my personal life. At some point, because I see a phenomenal, in my opinion, functional medicine person that we both know dear and
Sure.
appreciate. But at some point in my life, I had Lyme disease. And I'm pretty sure I know when. We don't know if I still have like lingering symptoms of it now, but I've done a lot of work to get to a place where it's healthy. But there are individuals out there that, like, to a certain degree, kind of get a little hoaxy with it, right? Like, and it's very similar. There's like people can get PANS or PANDAS with OCD, and that's when you develop the onset of OCD from strep. And that can go a very functional medicine route. And I think the problem is, like, we know to a certain degree, but then we don't know anymore. And so I think doctors can kind of at times keep people on this loop of trying to help them figure out when maybe there aren't as many answers as they were hoping. But I also think a lot of people have health anxiety. And so they're going to look for an answer that they're going to be for sure about. And again, health is something we don't have certainty about, right? You kind of mentioned there's the spectrum of the human body. And is it ever really going to be perfect? No. There's going to be aches and pains because we're human, and that's going to happen. And so if we're constantly fixating on that, of course we're going to notice things, right? Like if I fixate on my big toe long enough and I think about it for the next 10 minutes and start telling myself it hurts, it's going to start hurting.
Right.
So I think there's the combination of a bunch of things going on.
So what do you tell this person though that is, you know, focused on that last 1%
I love
margin?
that question. Yeah, I'm going to ask them what their values are. Like, and they might tell me, you know, I value time with my family. I value being able to enjoy a sunny day. And then I'm going to say, well, have you been doing that? How has that been going for you lately, right? Because if they've been on this health train that doesn't seem to have an end to it, they're not spending time with their family. Even if they are, they're not fully present. They're in their head the whole time evaluating their symptoms. When was the last time you've enjoyed a sunny day? Similar concept, right? Okay, so clearly I think we're misaligning with our values. At some point, we have to accept that this is a never-ending road, and maybe have some acceptance around, can I feel pretty good? And can I get back to my values and the thing I care about while accepting that things are pretty good? And that's not what I'm saying about everyone. People truly do have diseases and things that they need to address, but I think there's this fine line you have to be careful with, that it can go too far.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, how long does it take for someone? Do you see people, you have this conversation, and it's just like this aha moment, or does it take a little bit of time?
Definitely takes some time. I always, I have some patients that are a little bit perfectionistic, and we'll set up a plan for them to work on something, and they'll come in and they'll say, well, yeah, I did these homework things really well, but I messed up right here, and I can't believe I did it. And I said, well, if it were the case that everyone would accomplish their homework to 100%, we'd treat OCD in a day. You'd be in and out and on with your life, but that's not how it works, right? It's about repetition and practice and building your confidence and your ability to see that you can tolerate uncertainty. The only way we can do that is by living life and experiencing experiences, and that takes time.
Yeah, and for someone that's listening to this, like how long, I mean, maybe you may or may not have an actual recommendation, but like how long does it usually take for someone to kind of to really overcome these things and get, I don't want to use the word healthy or unhealthy, but like, in general or on average, like how long are we working on these types of things?
Can't speak to it from a medical side, but I can definitely speak to it from a mental health side. And if someone's dealing with mental illness like anxiety, it really depends on the diagnosis too. But we usually say an average of like 12 to 18 sessions. And usually you meet with a provider once a week. And if anxiety is severe, right, if someone's homebound because of their OCD, it's going to be longer. They probably need more intensive treatment. And at our residential clinic that I work at, it's more like 10 to 12 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. So if someone's kind of dealing with some things, they should know, like, hey, we're looking at least 3 months here.
Yeah,
committing,
exactly.
And that's okay.
Right, that's okay. I mean, you think about the amount of time that anxiety is taken away from you already, 3 months is nothing, right? Yeah. Usually when people are at a point of getting therapy, it's because their anxiety has become debilitating on some capacity.
Yeah, I was about to go a different direction, but I'd like to ask, why do we wait so long? You mentioned earlier the 17 years things for OCD, and my thought there, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that people they don't really think it's that big of a deal. So maybe that's why that particular one gets put off. But is that the case for everything?
So I think that's one reason with OCD and anxiety why people don't get treatment. I think another reason is the stigma. So with OCD, just to kind of educate the audience a little bit, there are about 8 different subtypes of OCD. Most people know about 2 of them. So contamination, the one that you can physically see, people washing, scrubbing their hands, is one. The other one would be like keeping things just right or having them be a certain way. But the subtypes that I experienced were more of the taboo subtypes, harm intrusive thoughts and sexual intrusive thoughts. And those are when, and actually we all have intrusive thoughts. So we've all driven over a bridge at some point and had this random thought of, I could swerve off this bridge right now, and we don't think anything of it, right? We're like, that's a weird thought, and we get back to what we're doing. Right. Someone with OCD will attach meaning to that thought. Why did I have a thought like that? Does that mean I'm going to harm myself? Should I avoid being next to a staircase? Should I avoid taking my medication alone? They are not suicidal, and I want to make that very clear. We probably need to put a plug at this, on this episode.
little trigger warning there.
Yes, sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're
good. But they're not suicidal by any means. It's actually quite the opposite. They're doing everything they possibly can to avoid that, but it's taking over their lives, right? And so when I was in college, I remember I used the staircase example because of my harm OCD. I kept thinking, what if I impulsively jump off this staircase? I didn't want to take my life. I really wanted to live a normal, healthy life, but I was so afraid of doing that I would slam myself against the wall as I would go up the stairs to this class that I had. And so these are equally as common, really, as contamination OCD, but clearly you think you're going to tell someone about, and harm OCD can be harm to self or others. So I could be cutting an onion in the kitchen and my loved one would walk in and I'd have this random intrusive thought of violence, and I'd be so scared to be around my loved one, so scared to be around sharp objects. Again, they're never at risk of actually doing those things. They're the least likely to ever do those things, but it takes over every area of their life. So all that to say, I think stigma, fear of what others are going to think, and that's not just with OCD, that's with really any mental illness, especially with the world of athletes, right? Athletes are supposed to be viewed as strong, empowering individuals that never cry or never weakness, and I think we're changing that, but I still think there's a long way to go with it.
Yeah, you're talking about the quick thoughts or whatever. It brought to another saying that my wife and I use, which is like our brains lie to us. And so just because something comes to your mind, and obviously you're a professional here, correct me or fix whatever I'm saying, but just because something comes to your mind doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
So in your professional opinion, like, why do those thoughts even come into our mind? Because I guess the problem is when you allow that thought to have meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know that those random thoughts come in our mind, you just blow them off.
Right.
But why do they happen?
So for the ones that are attaching extra meaning, they're paying more attention to them, right? And so I think the natural response that any human would want to do is, oof, don't think of that thought. Why would I think of that thought, right? Well, and if I tell you right now, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a pink elephant, what are you thinking of?
Exactly, a pink
Yeah,
elephant.
a pink elephant,
A
right?
blue
And
elephant.
so a blue elephant. Sometimes I get answers like that. That means something else. I'm just kidding.
Going against the norms, man.
Now we have a real problem.
No, but the natural response is to, well, let me push this down, let me push it down, but then it only comes back stronger. And so that's where we see individuals that have more intense intrusive thoughts, right? They've been responding to them, their amygdala misfires, and then they tell themselves there's danger here, when actually we have to teach the brain that actually my amygdala misfires, or my brain lies to me sometimes. And my other go-to statement, I didn't trademark this, someone else did, but if you can name it, you can tame it. Right. So if you can name, oh, there's my intrusive thought, then we can tame it instead of, oh no, this thought must be real. I better act as if it's real.
Have you ever met anyone that doesn't have those thoughts at all, like ever? Or is that even possible?
I think everyone has them. There was a research study, and I don't remember exactly how many people are in it, but so many people had an OCD diagnosis and so many didn't. And in the study, they had everybody write down their intrusive thoughts, and someone went through them to try to determine who had OCD and who didn't. They couldn't tell the difference. But I think, there's people that have intrusive thoughts that nothing misfires with, right? Like they don't think twice about it. Usually it's just that, oh, that was a weird thought. And then they go forward with their day. In ERP, the type of treatment we do for OCD, we try to get people to practice that response even before they feel like doing it. And I always say it's behavior change before feeling change. When you change the behavior enough, the feeling should follow. So
do you induce the thoughts?
Yeah. So we'll have like another thing when I was younger, the number 6 really triggered me, and I avoided doing things in 6s. And of course that took a long time for me to get through things, because I would think that maybe I accidentally tapped that table 6 times. I've got to go and tap it again, or, all of these repetitive behaviors. And so if a patient has that, we might put the number 6 on a whiteboard so that they're exposing themselves to it on a day-to-day basis, and then realizing, oh, I can tolerate that. We're changing their response to it though, right? Like that response prevention. So usually when they would see the number 6, maybe they would go tap something 4 times. Now when you see the number 6, can you eliminate that response? Can you go on with your day without doing anything to try to get rid of the anxiety? And then finally the anxiety starts to go away.
Yeah, for me, like my quick thoughts are just like negative self-talk. Like, and maybe this is pretty normal in the like entrepreneur world, when you're always kind of worried about what's going to happen.
Right.
And you're always facing something you're unfamiliar with. That's like, I would say like the most difficult part for me is like every day there's something that you're not sure, but you're unfamiliar with. So it's like every day you're having to fight that intrusive thought that says you don't know what you're doing. You're not a good business owner.
Yeah.
You're going to fail.
Yeah.
And it's just like, sometimes you can overcome it quickly and just get right back to it. And then other times it really takes over.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the first reminder is we start to believe what we tell ourselves. Right. And so if we keep telling ourselves, I'm dumb, we truly are going to start to believe that. That's why they say it's so detrimental to tell a little kid you're not smart, because they're going to start believing they're not smart and they're going to stop trying in school. But our adult brains do that too, to an extent. And we have to, the approach in that is more of a cognitive behavioral approach. So cognitive reframing. When we recognize a distorted thought, that's where the, if you can name it, you can tame it really comes in. That's a distorted thought. Let me reframe that with something that's more realistic, right? And people will often say, well, yeah, but I don't believe the reframe. Okay, well, you are believing this other thought because of what? Because you've told yourself that for so long. What do you think is going to happen if you start telling yourself the reframed thought? Okay, well, I could start to believe that. And so it just takes time.
Yeah, it does definitely take a lot of time. Something else that you guys mentioned in the Imposter episode was that you just have to remind yourself that you're just a beginner at this thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Like if it is actually your first time, like what is your expectation of,
right?
Or why do you have this expectation of knowing how to do it?
Yeah, and people always ask, like, what constitutes a perfectionist? And I will say, Well, sometimes their house can be really messy. Sometimes they're missing deadlines. Sometimes they're not equating to what they need to. And they'll usually have this response of, well, I thought a perfectionist was always put together, always doing these things to an excellent degree. Well, not if their expectations are too high. If their expectations is to make their house immaculate without any flaws, imagine how hard it would be for anyone to start that task, right? And so we put it off and we procrastinate instead of, can we make our expectations more realistic? And that's actually going to make us successful. Whereas when we get too high of expectations, we start to lose the success because we think, well, I can't measure up, why bother?
Yeah, I'd like to change a little bit to some gym specific stuff, if you don't
let's do it.
mind. I feel like a lot of the things that we've talked about, maybe it's the same, maybe it's a little different. You talked about pre-performance anxiety is something that you kind of specialize in. So maybe you can talk about what that is. And maybe we can call just like showing up to the gym is a performance in itself, right? And I was telling you earlier when you came in, a lot of the people that we work with are people that I have what I call, quote, gym anxiety, which I don't know if that's a real term.
Right.
They just have, they don't like the gym. They don't like the weights. They think the gym is full of, big buff guys like throwing weights around and stuff. It's very intimidating for them. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about, what causes that, how you help with that? Maybe, obviously you have a little bit of experience with it yourself as an athlete.
Yeah.
So anything you have.
I think a few things, right? So one would be, we often picture the worst case scenario happening when we have time to wait for an event. And so if I have a race and I know it's coming up in 3 weeks, that can feel like torture if all I'm doing is trying to anticipate and predict the race. An athlete that really hones in on their anxiety and gets it to a helpful degree is they trust that I'm going to show up when the starting line needs me to show up, right? And so I think that when we have all of this anticipation, we try to predict what will happen, and it doesn't help because we're trying to get to a place of certainty that we can't actually get. And when we ruminate, we know that builds more anxiety. And so that by the time you're actually going to the gym, your anxiety is going to be through the roof. And so I think a few exercises can be helpful. One that I really like to do is have anyone put their name on a piece of paper, and they'll write their name in the middle, and then I'll ask them, what are some adjectives or words that your friends would use to describe you that have nothing to do with your success? So for example, they wouldn't put, I am an all A student. They wouldn't put that I won this award. They would put things like funny. They would put active. They would put those types of adjectives. And then I'll ask, okay, after you go to the gym today, are all those things still going to be true about you? And then it's kind of like when you say an aha moment, that's one of those, right? Like there's this aha moment of, oh yeah, I guess that these things will still be true. Okay, so how much does this experience really matter if all these values and things that you care about are still going to be true, right? Because the way that they're putting it in their brain is this matters so much. It's like a life or death situation because of what their anxiety is doing. And we have to bring it back to the basics to get them to a place where, oh yeah, I can handle this even though it might be kind of hard.
Mm-hmm. And then have you ever seen someone, any of your patients that just have this consistent, they can't do certain activities because of this anxiety?
Yeah, I'll give an example. I had a male basketball player who over time started thinking that his legs were going to freeze when he would go out onto the court at high school athlete, and was avoiding the court. He would avoid even going into the parking lot and just like removed himself from the team. And this wasn't very long. His parents were very quick to get him into therapy because he had an opportunity to play in college.
He's a great
good
player.
athlete. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. But he was so worried about his legs turning to jelly. And that was caused from the anxiety, right? Like that sensation you can get when you're really anxious. Everybody's hits differently, but for him, it was legs would feel like jelly is how he would word it. And so we started slowly doing some exposure work. We would go to the local playground area where there was a basketball court and we played a game of horse. And then I told him, dribble around the court. I asked him, do your legs feel like jelly? And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh, interesting. You still dribbled all the way around the court and we played a game of horse, right? Because his brain has told him, if that happens, I can't handle it. Well, we just proved that happened and he still handled it. So we built up these exposures of going and sitting in the parking lot and just of the stadium and dribbling a ball and then getting to a point where he could get to practice again and just reteaching his brain that he doesn't have to let anxiety win. And so that's a lot of what it would look like in therapy.
Yeah. So it's about finding a way to get the activity done.
Right. Instead of trying to convince yourself that I can only do this when this experience is gone.
Mm-hmm. I feel like having the right, so maybe you hear this all the time, but like the right support system, no matter what the case is so important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that gets back to one, the evidence-based practice, right? Like making sure that you're seeing a provider that in a sense you vibe with, but that also is going to challenge you. Oftentimes we want to be told as humans that we're right, or just want to be told what we want to hear, but are we really growing when that happens, right? And then the other piece is, I wouldn't, with taboo OCD intrusive thoughts, I wouldn't go tell the general public without educating them first on what OCD is, because they might hear about those intrusive thoughts and think, oh my goodness. But, really getting to a place where if your support system doesn't have the education and you're in therapy, usually a good provider will say, hey, let's bring your family member in to educate them for a moment, right? To just give them an idea of what's going on, because all they see is you're avoiding doorknobs. At one point you weren't, right? Or all they see is you're having panic attacks, and at one point you weren't. In their minds, they're probably thinking, what in the world is going on? But to get that education from outside of the inner circle can be so beneficial. And I'll even say that, if it's OCD and someone in my own family system has OCD, I'm not going to treat them. I'm in their inner circle. I'm too in it with them. I'm not going to see it clearly. So they need someone from outside of their kind of intertwined support group to see things more clearly.
Yeah, you know what might be more important? You probably already know this, but this is just a big aha moment for me right now. What might be more important for overcoming all the anxiety that we have is educating the people that aren't suffering. Because if you have a friend or family member that is suffering, they for sure in that moment can't do anything about it.
Right.
But maybe you can.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, right? Because oftentimes I work with families who have accommodated the person's anxiety their whole life. And what I mean by that is it might look like, well, we try to do everything we can to make sure that they're not anxious. Well, actually, the therapy is to teach their brain that they can be anxious and tolerate it anyways. So I think that it's still super relevant and important to educate them on what behaviors or what responses are helpful and what responses aren't helpful, because any family member that loves their loved one that's going through anxiety is going to accommodate, because that's our human nature. When we see someone suffering, we want to jump in and rescue them. But the alternative to that is actually what works when it comes to therapy, right? Is teaching the individual that you don't have to run away from anxiety, that you can feel it and still live a values-based life. And so all that to say, I think it's so, so important and crucial to educate the general public so that they can recognize, because usually our general responses are not the right ones.
Yeah, they're like, that person's weird or something like that.
Right,
I feel like those are the things that make it worse.
Yeah, definitely.
And should a onlooker, friend or family member, should you try to do anything, or should you just consult professionals?
No, if you see that your loved one is struggling and you know of a good resource, absolutely. I think it's the way you go about it, right? Not in a condescending way or in a mean way, but gosh, it really seems like you're struggling right now. Anybody would be with that, right? Like trying to empathize sort of in a sense. You might know of a story, right? Like my boss, Dr. Elizabeth Mackingale, her OCD journey is all over and she's got some really inspirational videos. So you might know somebody that you could point this person to, right? To just watch that video, see that you're not alone in this. Because really people don't want to get help. One of the main reasons is because they feel like they're alone in it. Mm-hmm. So if you can bring to light that other people actually deal with this and there's actually support and help that you could get, that's actually very normalized to get, right? That's one good thing about today's society is 20 years ago, 30 years ago even, if people were going to therapy, something was wrong with them. Now, having a therapist is a cool thing. So we should take advantage of that and really, help people get the help they need.
How do you recommend starting that conversation though? Because I'm just thinking, I'm thinking of someone in my head right now. It's like, wow, I don't want this person to be what, because here's what goes in my head. It creates anxiety for me to think that what if I talk to this person, they actually don't have a problem. And I just thought that they did. And now my relationship is
Yeah. So, no, I've been in that situation
Okay.
and it's so tough. I think you have to kind of draw back for a second and ask, what would you want in that situation, right? If you were suffering, you didn't realize you were suffering, right? And you really had a lot of loved ones in your corner, would you want them to walk on eggshells around you? Or would you want someone to be brave enough to come have a conversation with you about what you were going through? And I think the other question, not that you ask this, but that people ask often is, well, like, how do I do that, right? Like, how do I do that without upsetting them?
Yeah, exactly.
And the
Yeah.
key answer is you have to take the risk that you might upset them, right? Like
Mm.
people often will ask me, well, how do I set a boundary without it upsetting someone? Well, if you didn't upset someone or if you didn't cause some kind of intense emotion, you probably didn't set a boundary, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
so true.
Very true.
I think when we do that at first, we have to recognize we're kind of like paying the dues to help later. It's one of those things where it's not an instant gratification, but it takes time to get the results of that.
Yeah, I just instilling the confidence that
Yeah.
it will happen.
Right.
And that it's okay to spark an emotional response
exactly.
in that moment.
It's actually, there's so many times where even in our own lives, we could probably reflect on how someone set a boundary. Most of the time we appreciate it later if it was a good boundary that was set.
Yeah, it just takes a while.
It just takes a while.
yeah.
It just takes a while. Exactly.
100%.
It's hard to come to terms with, but if you can build self-awareness, which therapy does, right? So then you can kind of appreciate it later.
Yeah,
We grow.
sometimes takes longer than others.
True. Very true.
It's so interesting how that happens. Sometimes like tomorrow you feel it, and then other times it's like a year or two later, it
Yeah.
starts to
Right.
come around,
Right. Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier too, which is always feeling the need to be right. What's going on? I have that.
Yeah.
Like you're talking to someone, you realize that you're wrong, and you're like, oh crap. Like, why is that so hard?
Well, I think people are driven. Well, some people are driven, right? And you want to be in a place where you can be leading and doing things right. And so you feel like you're walking this fine line of I better never make a mistake. And the problem with that is you're kind of building this expectation that you can't fail. And in order to do great things, we have to fail, right? Like we have to be okay with failing, I think too. And so just like reminding yourself, okay, if my expectation is to always be right, am I setting the best example that I want to for others that are following when they make a mistake? That's something that I do too, is right. Like I cannot make a mistake because other people are looking up to this. Well, if anything, you're just teaching them that you're human too. Right. And setting this groundwork for others to follow suit, which is what you would want for them to try things that are scary and know that they can make mistakes too.
Yeah, that's definitely the one for me. You kind of nailed it with, you don't want to fail,
Right.
because then other people see you fail and then they think you're a loser and then they think you shouldn't be there. Then they don't look up to you anymore. And it's just
There's
like,
that self-talk.
there it goes. It's just
The
like,
spiral.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
the
wanted to kind
spiral.
of spill it out of
Yeah.
there. So do you have anything, for moments like this? I know this is very specific. I'm asking you a lot of questions.
Yeah,
but
I would encourage you to try a new skill that you're not good at. And just
Okay.
like go.
There's plenty.
Yeah, I was going to say go be bad at it and try to
Ah.
see if you can still have fun while being bad at it. Because one, you're teaching yourself something, right? That you can tolerate some of those fails. But then the main, most important thing is to the next time, because it's inevitable. The next time you make a mistake, change the way you react to it. Because in the past, it was all of the negative self-talk. It was all of the amygdala firing away, right? And can we train our brain to do something different this time? So the second you realize you make a mistake, light bulb goes off, opportunity for me to do something different here. I'm going to be kinder to myself. I'm going to kind of just recognize that this is a great moment for me to be human and see what I've learned.
Do you think that even though that's a different thing, it's still, so let me I'll break it down for you. Like if I go try an activity and I'm bad at it and I overcome it, do you think that skill translates to my relationship, for example, or to my ability as a business owner with like employees? Like, does that skill translate? Because to me, it feels way different.
It does feel different. I think it can. So I will be honest, I have a very similar mindset when it comes to making mistakes. I only like participating in activities that I know I'm going to win at or that I know I'm really good at,
Yes,
right?
100%.
And it's super uncomfortable for me to play a game. Like I went and I did a kickball league with my husband and his friends, and I'm terrible at kickball, and I had the worst time. but I did the whole season, right? And I
Nice.
learned a lot of skills along the way. I hated that the guys would boss me around and put me in the outfield because they knew I wasn't going to be able to catch the ball. I got so into it and like in my head about it, but I had to learn to try harder, do better, but also not beat myself up for it because it was just a game. It was a social league, and I needed to teach myself that I could have fun in it. So I do think it can be transferable if you try to look for the skills that are transferable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it comes back to the mindset. So like my initial thought is these are different, unrelated, doesn't help.
Right.
But if it's like, well, it's actually the same skill that is going on.
Exactly. You're just kind of like, it's easier to avoid it, right? Because the second I realized I was bad was the first game. And I was like, I do not want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not coming back. But then I realized like I made a commitment to the team. Even if I am just going to be in the outfield, they need that many players on the field. And so I would have avoided it altogether. And then what would I have been sending to my brain? You can't fail. Right. And so that's that transferable piece of, you can go through a whole season and you can fail and it's going to be uncomfortable, but that's kind of the evidence my brain needs for the areas that I really apply every day in life.
Yeah, I'm the worst
that.
loser.
I love that.
I mean, it's so bad. Like
I'm kind of good at losing, honestly.
Really?
Like, like the most recent thing that I picked up is probably like I played a little pickleball, and dude, that was so fun.
It is
like
fun.
I wasn't great at it. I was good at kind of like talking like shit though, like walking up and being like, "Hey man, so I'll teach you guys how to do it, and we'll like really like get it all figured out." Literally, first time ever been in a pickleball court. So yeah, I just like having fun with it. But it's like even if you're not super good at it, I love like the transference of that skill, like working that muscle of like, we've talked about it before with leg days. Some people really just don't look forward to it. And I was one of them. And once I started running more, I noticed that I had some weaknesses in my legs. So I started putting leg days first and putting certain movements first. And once I started doing that, I started liking them. And then that transferred into becoming a better runner. So it all worked together. It was beautiful.
Yeah. My current exposure for myself is when I go play, like I love beach volleyball. When I go play a pickup game of beach volleyball and people are like, let's just not keep score. Let's play for fun. It's to not say anything.
That's so
hard. It's so hard, but I'm like, for fun. That's the fun part.
Winning is fun.
Yes,
okay,
exactly. So that's what I'm currently working on, and I know every time it gets hard, I'm like, but you're growing, Callie. You're growing. I have to convince myself.
I'm the same way. Yeah, I definitely want to keep some type of score. Like I would never go on a run now without tracking it. So it's like I'm that type, but I try to keep it like in the middle somewhere.
Yeah,
for sure.
just trying to grow through it. Exactly.
Yeah, I love what Sean talked about, like the overcoming and the getting better at something. Like you said, find something you're not good at and become good at. It does feel so good.
Right.
But I almost I'm embarrassed when I lose. Like I don't know what it is. It's just like don't look at me.
You're hiding behind the
I'm
pickleball
like playing
paddle.
skee ball. I lose a game of skee ball.
Yeah.
It's just Sean. And I'm just like
and the whole time I'm like, dude, I'm a skee ball pro. I got you, dude.
You're like building him up.
Yeah, trying,
but do you
man.
think they're like Denver, my wife, she often uses she says that she has like a healthy anxiety. It helps her become better. So what are your thoughts on I so badly don't want to lose that it makes me try harder to win. Like, is that okay? Is there a healthy anxiety going on there?
Yeah, I think when someone can kind of mistake anxiety for excitement, they're probably in a good zone. Because the parts of our brains that light up when we're excited and we're anxious are very close to each other. And so if you can feel anxious and excited at the same time, it's probably healthy anxiety. If you are feeling anxious and dread, it's probably not in the healthiest place, and you need to kind of practice that.
It's so true. Yeah, I think I'm just instantly thinking about like race day. Yeah. There's so many times like the leading up to the race, I'm like, oh man, this is tough. But then I get there, oh man, you hear the people cheering, all the whistles. You see everyone else about to do the same thing, and you're like, dude, let's go. This feels so good. But then I've also been on the other side, this past week of the anxiety of pulling up to the house and knowing what you're going to see. And it's like, whoa, this is a little crazy. And
Exactly.
I still ran either way.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes. But yeah, I totally agree. That's
So anxiety
insane.
can be healthy.
Anxiety
Yeah.
can be, I mean, you need it in
Yeah.
some instances, right? It gets your adrenaline pumping. And we do amazing things when we have our adrenaline running through our brains. And so you do need some of that. It means you care about whatever it is that you're about to face.
Yeah, how do we make that more normal? Because I feel like anytime somebody hears anxiety, it's an immediate kind of negative.
Yeah, well,
you know?
I think the first thing is we need to stop looking for the quick fixes, right? We need to stop trying to get rid of it all the time and more have this approach of like, it's going to show up today. Like sometimes we just wake up and we feel more anxious. Can we not pay so close attention to that and still enjoy our day? Because yeah, we kind of do tell ourselves in society today that you can only feel good feelings all the time, but that's not how life works, right? Like sometimes you're going to just be more anxious and sometimes you still need to walk the dog or sometimes you still have to answer your emails or sometimes you still have to go play in that game. Like see what you can do instead of trying to shoo it away in order to have a good day.
I've been holding off on this question for a while, but you mentioned earlier Olympic trial marathon.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. That sounds pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was in 2020. I qualified and ran in Atlanta for the marathon. And so in college, I ran the 5K, 10K, and then a year after college said I wanted to give it a go to try to make it to the Olympic trials. And my coach from college coached me through. And it was it was Houston Marathon that I ran and qualified with a qualifying time and went out to Atlanta, and it was unlike any other experience I'd ever had. So.
Wow.
That's so cool.
Do you mind if I ask your best marathon time?
2:42.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very
and some
fast.
change.
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Marathons
Nice.
hurt. I'm taking a little bit of a break
That's
from it. They
wild.
do hurt. Yeah. There is something
What is a mile? What does your mile pace look
What is
at?
the mile pace?
for that. It's like 6
and change.
15, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's so fast.
That's so impressive.
That's so
Thank you.
fast, dude. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's been a long journey. I think well, you say once a runner, always a runner,
Sure,
but
yeah.
the good thing about it is Houston has an amazing training community for
Yes,
runners.
it does.
So
Yes.
I didn't really have to do much of the training alone, which helped a lot.
Yeah, I got into running, maybe 2 years ago? About 2 years ago.
Nice.
Ran the Houston Marathon last year.
Yeah, I was out there.
Denver ran. We were kind of going this direction earlier. I was going to mention it, and then we kind of changed directions, which is fine. But the Houston Marathon was just a few weeks ago, right? And she was training. We hired a coach. Powerhouse Gym.
Yeah.
Are you familiar? Yeah. So Johnny trains. One of his coaches trained me for my marathon last year, and then
cool.
Johnny trains Denver himself. And now he's training her for High Rocks also, which is in 2 weeks. But anyways, Houston Marathon training plan, killing it. Didn't miss a single run. Everything was on track. 2 days before the marathon, she finds out we didn't sign up for the marathon.
Oh,
and it was just like this,
Such a bummer, dude.
let down.
Yes, it was this crazy thing.
Oh,
Because I guess what happened was she had signed up for the Bridge Series. Are you familiar with that? Yeah. And I guess just in her mind, like she did the Bridge Series and the marathon at the same time. And she was like, hey, when am I supposed to pick up my packet and all this stuff? And
It wasn't getting
It
those.
wasn't.
Oh, that's so sad.
So anyways, we found the Sugarland Marathon
Yeah.
and she really enjoyed it because it was less people. It
Right.
wasn't super crowded.
Totally different experience for sure.
Totally different. And it was really fun. She did really good.
Oh, amazing.
She killed it. Did so good.
That's
Anyways, so the running community in Houston has been very good to us as well.
Yeah, I love it. It's hard to step away from, which is why I'm like, I'm taking a break this year. And then I end up signing up to do some kind of pacing or something for Houston every
Awesome.
year.
Yeah, so tell us about your routine now. What do you got going on now, fitness-wise?
Yeah, so I just signed up. I did the catapults for Houston. So that's where you guide a blind athlete. And that was such a fun experience. Yeah, I really loved it.
For the full marathon?
For the full marathon. And so now I'm taking a little bit of a break, some family planning, things like that. And so the goal is to get back to another really fast marathon again. I did a few Spartan races also and loved it.
Nice.
So maybe I'll get back into that. But I really like this. Like, I'm not really sure what's next. I'm always going to be like a fitness person that works out and does stuff. I did get a Peloton treadmill.
Okay.
I don't know
Cool.
how you guys feel about those, but it is so much fun.
Never used one, to be honest.
Okay.
they
I
look
mean, I
pretty-
know
they
what
look-
it is.
Yeah,
and
they
how
look
it
pretty
works,
cool.
and-
They have like on that thing, they have Guitar Hero for the Peloton. You
What?
literally, so the
Oh, yeah, that sounds
sides of it are
crazy.
rolls. Like you roll the wheel and you can increase your speed or your incline. So it's like you're on a track, you're running on a track on this big screen,
Okay.
and the music plays, and you have to get to a certain lane by rolling the wheel to increase your speed, or like rolling it down to get in the other lane.
Oh.
It's wild.
so
Wow,
cool.
very fun. So, are
It's
you
fun.
strictly an endurance athlete, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can sprint, but everyone will beat me. I
But
would
you
call it a
can.
sprint. Other people
Yeah.
probably wouldn't.
What about strength training? Do anything on the weights? Do you go to the gym environment at all?
I've gone to some gym, like back and forth with some gym work. My husband
Okay.
tries to get me into it. We got into rock climbing for a little while.
Fun.
And he was wearing headphones while doing the workout and trying to correct my gym form. Not realizing how loud he was speaking in front of the entire gym.
That's so funny.
Talk about gym anxiety, right? I was so mad at him. Like, we are not doing this again. So he will not be my personal
Hey,
trainer.
Callie, straighten that back.
Yeah, so you want to lift up, right?
Yeah, shut it. Yeah. So, no.
Did you grab some deodorant on the way out? I didn't grab any. Did you grab some?
exactly
That is
like that.
so funny.
But he we just moved houses. He built a gym in our garage.
Cool.
And
Nice,
so
nice.
I might try again since he'll only be yelling in the garage
Okay.
vicinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd love to get more into it. I did a little bit of strength training my final year at Rice when I
Okay.
was running, and it's really important.
Yeah, it's all about finding obviously what works, for each individual
Right.
person, what you enjoy doing
Yeah.
is so important. We talk to people about that all the time. Obviously, it's a gym. We call it functional strength training.
Yeah.
Maybe you've heard that term. It's kind of overused at this point. CrossFit, kind of brought the functional fitness
Right.
thing, but
Right.
I've even heard the term we use, like functional bodybuilding is like another term that I kind of like to
Yeah, I
use
love
because the big compound, like the big Olympic lifts and stuff, for our client base, it's just too much skill involved.
Right.
So we do a lot of the like traditional bodybuilding
Yeah.
movements just
Makes
because
a
they're
lot of sense.
safer
Right.
and easier to teach. But anyways, so obviously we want people doing that strength training, muscle mass and all those types of things, but just general activity,
Yeah.
getting outside, vitality
I
is
love
a
that.
word that I like to use, like being in the sun,
Yeah.
getting outside. And I'm sure there's lots of benefits for mental health as well,
Totally.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
with that kind of stuff. So, well, Sean, do you have any questions specifically?
I have two.
Two?
Actually. The first one is how do you handle facing certain emotions? So I know that do you suggest like embracing them and like really working through that emotion? If you're really sad or you're really depressed, you just really like, okay, I'm gonna kind of sit in this and like learn how to like work through on the next side? Or do you kind of suggest like not really like putting it down, but also almost like replacing the emotion with possibly doing something else? So like,
It's a great question.
a good
Yeah,
question.
I like how you worded it, like working through them, because I think that's a key important term. So when someone is dealing with like grief, right? Someone's grieving. I'm not a grief specialist by any means, but I've walked through some really intense grief in my own life. It's not helpful to stay in it, right? So it's not helpful to avoid it either. You have to be able to work through it, I think, is the important piece. And so like allowing yourself to feel that emotion, but not getting stuck in it. And I like to use anger. Like, let's use anger. I lived a life for a long time where anger was not allowed in my vocabulary. And I would try my hardest to never feel it. And that's not healthy either, because you bottle it up and you think about, like, I use the Mentos in a soda bottle analogy, right? Like,
you just
likely
pop.
to explode in a way that makes sense for you. Like, I'm not really an angry person. So my exploding
Is
looks
different.
like an anxiety attack, right?
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
but yeah, I think it's important to not like label those feelings as bad, because that's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, anger is a bad emotion and I can't feel it. No, anger, just like every other emotion, is healthy at times. It's when you get stuck in it or you're trying to avoid it altogether that it can come back to get you.
I
What
love
would you-
that.
Is it okay if I ask, like, how long would you consider stuck? Like, at what point do you consider it
Yeah.
stuck versus acceptance?
Right. I wouldn't necessarily put like a time on it, more of a behavior. Like, so if I am building up, I had a situation kind of tied to the grief where I was just so angry. And everything that an individual in my life did just added onto the anger and added onto the anger. Like, see, there's another thing they did, right? And that wasn't helpful. I wasn't working through any anger. All I was doing was building resentment and getting more frustrated. And so that's kind of an example of an unhealthy behavior. Whereas a healthy behavior would be to, yeah, my anger is valid. Like, it's okay that I feel angry. I have every right to feel angry, and some acceptance of, and this person might not have the coping skills that they need to be able to change. Can I move through that, and can I accept that and process that, knowing that it may not be okay, but I might have to set some boundaries around that instead of continuing to hope and wait out for them to change. So that would be like the difference in the two.
Yeah, I like that.
I love that. This second question I have is a toxic trait of mine is asking for help. And I just wanted to know, how would you suggest handling asking for help? Because I also feel like on the opposite side, if someone needed help from me, I will be there in 2 seconds, no issue. But it's like, for example, I had went and did a shoot a couple probably like a year or two ago, and I had an older car, and I pulled up to a photo shoot, and I was like, okay, I'm here a little early. Let me go grab some coffee. I go probably like a mile and some change down the road to a Target, a Starbucks to grab some coffee. I come out and my starter went out in my car. So instead of calling the guy that I was shooting with, good friend of mine, would have done it, no problem. I packed up my bag, packed up my lights, packed up everything, put it on my back, and I just trucked the mileage, and it sucked. I was tired and my legs kind of hurt, but yeah, he was like, where are you coming from? I was like, Target. And I was just like, but in my head, I thought of everything else but asking someone else for help. So I guess like, how do you really, and it's something that I've been really like trying to work on, like hard.
I would start by asking yourself, what is my core belief around asking for help? Because I wonder if there's like,
I feel like it's a burden. I feel like I'm burdening someone.
So one of the questions that can keep us in check more than anything is like, well, what would I tell a friend going through this situation?
I would help them.
Yeah, I would never tell a friend to do what I'm doing right now. And so I need to, like, we really have to love ourselves in order to help other people, right? And so I need to work on having that kind of expectation for myself, and it doesn't happen overnight. Kind of like what we talked about with reframing. It's something that you have to practice in order to start believing it. And so giving yourself that grace you so freely give to others is hard to do, but also really helps you kind of get to a place where you can be replenished to help others like you do.
Yeah, obviously, Callie's the professional here, so I was going to let her answer. But you saying Sean is the first person anywhere to help anyone.
Yeah.
No matter what.
I believe
always. Two things you can count on Sean for: getting a good deal, right? No, seriously. He will get a deal. All right. Doesn't
I love Facebook Marketplace. I love Facebook
doesn't
Marketplace.
miss a deal and doesn't let anyone go without.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you are a practicing clinician, right? So tell us, just kind of, I know you said it earlier, but remind us, do you do virtual and in person, or?
Yeah. So I work with individuals virtually as long as they live in the state of Texas, and in person at the OCD Institute of Texas.
Where's that at?
In the Heights area,
Okay.
Heights area of Houston. And I do the Anxiety Society podcast, working on my dissertation right now on the post-Olympic blues and lots of other really cool things. So listeners, reach out if you want to know more.
How did y'all, what made you start the podcast? Because it's two of y'all. Tell us that quick story.
Yeah. So my boss, Elizabeth Mackingvale, she owns kind of she's director of our institute.
Okay, gotcha.
And she was kind of a mentor for me whenever I decided to go into the OCD field. I reached out to her, told her story was really inspiring to me. And she said she was a professor at Baylor and she needed a grad assistant. So I went in and started from the ground up, and I've worked with her ever since. So.
And y'all been doing the podcast for how long?
Just almost a year. We started in
Awesome.
July of last year. So we've hit the ground running. New episode every Tuesday. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, very cool. Well, guys, check out the Anxiety Society, and check out Callie. Do you have social media or anything?
Yeah, Callie Werner 1.
Okay.
No spaces or anything.
Easy.
Awesome.
Thank
you,
guys.
guys.
Thank you so much. Make sure you like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out.